You're listening to the Custom Built Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to discuss concepts. And when I say we, I mean me and my dog Samson, because he is refusing to lay down and wants to stay sitting up. So if you're watching, here is a beautiful mugshot of Samson. And I'm just here in the background because it's his world and I just live in it. All right, so I want to discuss concepts with y'all today because it's something that's so important, but I think it's also overlooked a lot when it comes to designing your home and designing it into what you want it to be and what you need it to be, right? So concepts are literally just an idea to further along and create the plan from that. And so a concept doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to make sense right away. It just needs to be out there. So if you have an idea for anything at all, anything, just jot it down. Draw it, whatever, right? You just put it out there. And don't judge it. Don't judge it for what it looks like, if it just completely doesn't make sense, if it just looks silly, like don't even judge it. I know sometimes there's this barrier and we get really caught up in our head about what it looks like, if someone's going to judge us over it, if we think it's going to be a bad idea, and not trusting that we understand or that we know, and that we're worried about what other people are going to think or say. And I know how hindering that can be when it comes to like just getting started. And a concept is really just that first step in getting started. So let's say you live in an older home that no longer functions for like today's livelihoods, right? Like the way that we move around and the way that we live, our electronics, like there's a lot of upgrades that could be happening when it comes to older homes. You know, our times have changed drastically, right? Like appliances alone, our refrigerators are like triple the size of what they used to be. Tripling is not, don't quote me on that. I'm sure that is a disgusting exaggeration for like the everyday refrigerator, but I think you understand where I'm going with this, right? Some of the older homes just aren't built for the customs of what we are used to today and what our modern technology has been built for, right? Like, I mean, just think about even your servers and your internet, like just having a whole server closet would be amazing. So anyway, I digress. When we are coming up with an idea, let's just say, like I said, for an older home or even in these newer homes, because they're not exempt from this, right? Like there are still times where a bad design is just a bad design. And if you're moving through your house and it just doesn't flow right and it doesn't make sense, and by flow, I just mean like the natural movement of how you move through your house. So like when you walk into your front door, are you walking right into like a foyer? Are you walking into a room? Are you walking into like a weird door or like a wall that kind of just like stops you there? These are things to really think about, like how you maneuver through your space and if it makes sense for how you move through your space. Do you entertain a lot? Does this block the view to your door if you want to see if like your friends and family are coming over? Or what about your kitchen, right? Like a lot of people love to entertain, want to cook and share that experience, and then not just feel like they are stuck in the kitchen and unable to enjoy the festivities if everybody else is in like the dining and the living spaces and your kitchen's like off to the side. So really consider how you're moving around in your home and how you would rather it go and what would make the most sense for you. So a concept in this sense would just literally be figuring out the flow of your house. So if you had your home and it was just an empty box, how would you move your house around to make it make sense for the flow of how you move? Do you want more space in your kitchen? Do you need more space in your kitchen? Maybe you have a larger family and y'all are just kind of like stuffed in there. Maybe your kitchen's kind of tight and it's just like stuffed in there. I mean, there's just unlimited reasons why, and there's no right or wrong for this because it ultimately 100% comes down to you and your family. There's no right or wrong except for what's right for you. So think about how you move around, how you want to move around, and what makes the most sense for how you live and how you want to move in your house. Is that repetitive? Probably. So take your house as an empty box. And then from there, just basically draw out these little circle spaces and just say like living room, bedroom. Don't put any walls up. It's just circles, ovals, squares. I don't care. Whatever shape you want to put it in, just make it kind of organic and make it really basic. So kitchen, bathroom, half bath, right? Den, whatever it is, kind of plot it out in this space. And then when you do that, also add some arrows so you're moving around the flow in your space and see what feels really good. And this is something you can what might be a really great idea, even cut out these pieces on separate piece of paper and kind of just shift them around so you're not stuck to, ripping out a piece of paper and redoing it. If that's your way of creating, though, go for it. And just see how your house would flow and feel if you had a little bit better movement going through. So that's one idea. That's one idea of coming up with a concept and making sure your home flows for you. Another thought I just had as I was thinking about this creation and getting your thoughts out there is, do you have space where you can get your creative juices rolling? So when you are not thinking about your home, what do you do to kind of release any creativity? Are you singing? Are you drawing? Are you doing any kind of building? It really, again, does not matter as long as it makes sense for you and it allows you to get some release there. Because when we got a lot of pent up and we don't feel like we're getting a lot of inspiration, it can be really difficult to get out of our head and just onto the paper and just really allow ourselves to let that creativity flow and see what comes out when we are in that space. So before you really get into this concept drawing experience, maybe give yourself some space to really get into a creative zone. And so whatever whatever it is, maybe it's just like listening to some music and just gets you going, gets you like lifted for it. And then also just reminding yourself that this is just for you. So you don't have to show anybody this. You can just let it be for you. So that way you could take out any judgment that might be around that if you feel judgment or scared or pressure around it being perfect or looking a certain kind of way. This is just for you. But it allows you to kind of get to that next step, because I'm sure many of you heard this before, but action creates clarity. And when we take that first step of just going and creating and just jotting it down and getting an idea out of our mind and out into the open, it allows us to take that next step. And it keeps us from getting stuck in this, but how is this going to happen? How? Right? Like, I don't know about you, but I get stuck in the how so much, and it just destroys any kind of productivity that I could be going, because I'm like, well, how am I going to do this? And how would it happen like that? And the times where I just remind myself, like, the how at this point doesn't matter. The how will come. I need to start here. So step one is just let it flow. Let it be creative and don't worry about the how. Trust the process, that the how will come when it needs to. And so when you are in your concept drawing, don't worry about, like, is this realistic? Is this possible? Because really anything is, when it comes to your house. You can move plumbing, you can move electricity, you can move load-bearing walls if you have an engineer that can also support this, right? I'm not saying like cut down your walls and do whatever you want. This is 100% concept. Okay, I don't want to hear anybody tell me that they cut down their walls or load-bearing walls and I'm getting in trouble for it. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. But don't think in the constraints of what your house is capable of doing. Okay, think of this in your what's the word I want? Just like you have nothing is in your way. This is like the sandbox version of playing and building your home. Okay, there is no constraints to this. So if you had it your way, how would you flow about your house? Okay, so take out the how, take out the what's realistic. Let's take out the logic. Let's 100% get into what could this be? What do I want it to be? What would be my dream house in this space right here? So step one, again, is just this concept of creating a spatial flow of what you want your house to function like. And then like step two is just really maybe at that point is drawing out some walls and seeing how it makes sense. You don't need to have You do not need to have dimensions on this, okay? This is just ideas right now. All right, eventually we'll get there. Eventually we'll like draw out the floor plan and then we'll see if it makes sense in that space. If we can move things in that way, or and by can we, I mean, will it fit in the budget that we have for this? And maybe you don't have a budget yet for that, and that's okay too, because now you at least just have that idea. And then maybe by the time you do get the budget, something shifted a little bit and you're like, I have an even better idea of how I can make this work for me. So again, don't come from a place of like how and everything else. We will get further along and we will do more of a concrete plan, and like that would be like the budgeting and the planning around that. But if you start with the concept and you start with the idea, you start to get really in touch with like what you want your home to feel like and how you want to move in your home, because that's crucial. That's just really gets you down to the basics of it. And I think it's a basic step that we all overlook and we don't think about, because sometimes we're so hyper focused on what's possible, what's realistic, what is my house capable in the state that it is now, what's possible with what I have as far as financial capabilities to make this work. So these are all things that play in our head before we even start with the concept. And then our concept is so like we are not free to do it. And so this is just that freedom to just dream it. So dream it is step one, right? Like it always starts with a dream. It always starts with an idea. And it could literally be as something as simple as like taking a picture of your space and then drawing it on your app, right? And you can just do a quick little sketch just to get your idea apart. And so maybe you start there. Maybe it's like, I have this idea and this would be really cool. I did this with with our back porch. We added a back porch over the summer last year, and it started with just a picture of our backyard, and I drew out what I thought would be really neat to have, and then we made it happen. So it was just like a little highlighter that I used, okay? And even through all like my training and my schooling, that was it. It wasn't anything spectacular. It wasn't anything fancy. It's just getting it out there. And I don't know if y'all have had this experience, but I think was like my first experience of like, I love designing houses was when I was in middle school. Like I don't even know what class it was, but we had like grid paper and they're like, design your dream house. And that house had like 800 rooms on it, and like one room was like an aquarium, like the floor was an aquarium, another room had like a trampoline. Like it was just so freeing just to have this idea. And do I have these things now? No. Do I want them now? No, of course not. I'm not a middle school age child making a dream house that would be fun to play in. But I do think about what I want as an adult and what would be really important. And then I also try and think about what my kids might want and what would be really fun for them. Like we've talked about adding like monkey bars under their loft bed so that way they can kind of like swing around on the inside and give them safer places to climb instead of them literally climbing the trim around, the trim around our house, because they will like Spider-Man up the walls and it drives me nuts. But it's like, all right guys, what can we do? Because they're kids and that's what they love to do. They love to climb and run and explore. And so when I come in and I'm trying to design and think about how we're going to make our spaces function well, I really do consider how we all move in these houses. So come up with an idea that feels amazing to you. What do you want? Like, what if you had anything you want? Do you want a yoga room? Do you want an art studio? Do you want a beautiful library? Whatever it is that you want, put it on this plan, because let's see what you can come from that. Maybe it's not a full out library, but do you get to like carve out a space in your home, a little corner where you're like, oh my gosh, this is magic. This is exactly the feeling I wanted. And sometimes we also forget to think about how we want to feel in our home. Our homes, we need to feel that, right? We need to feel the safe space of our home. And I mean, just what if you just had a space that you get to be like, whoa, this was everything I dreamed of. This is everything and beyond. So just go crazy in this concept and start with the flow and start with what you really want, and then build up from there, and then start kind of dropping in your walls and start dropping in what would be really cool if you could have it this way. Because you know what else? you could probably extend your home if it came down to it. If you're like, I really wanted this giant island in my kitchen, but my kitchen right now and the way that our house is laid out wouldn't work for this. But you know what? We have a little bit of space in the backyard that we can actually extend our kitchen and make this possible. You know, for example, for our home, I've told you before that this is like a smaller ranch home that's like 1,300 square feet, and it was built in like the 60s. So it's not super fun. Like the rooms are small. Like this room's like a 9 by 9, 9.5, maybe like 10, just under 10 feet. So 100 square feet of a room is really tight. And then when you got floor registers where your AC is coming up from the floor, you just lose all that extra floor space that you just don't even have to begin with. So our home is kind of hard to design around and to put furniture in. So that's why we get really crafty and creative. But I also just really love doing that. So there's that factor into it. But what I'm thinking about when we redo this house one day is completely like basically bringing it down to a shell and just rearranging it and moving the kitchen to like the whole other side of the house. It's like central right now, but what if we moved it to the other side? What if we had two separate places of like living and private area, like, or you know, like entertaining and public spaces. Public spaces would be like your kitchen, your living rooms, your dining rooms, like half baths, and your private space would be like your bedrooms, maybe your office if it's something that's more private and not a working one, like where you have clients and you see people in. So those would be like public and private places, and also really good for you to determine while you're doing your spatial planning is to understand like what your spaces are. So then when you look at it and you color code them, right? So like, yeah, I would do like my living room, my dining room, my and kitchen. I'm just repeating myself. My kitchen, my dining room, my living room, and like a half bath all in like green, and then that would just be my public spaces. And then I would do like all my bedrooms and then like my private bathrooms and maybe even my office into like purple, and that's my private spaces. And then that way I can also visually see where I laid everything out, and then I can also just get a quick reference to say, no, this doesn't make sense because I got a private space here and then a private space diagonal from it, and then like all in the middle is public, and I don't love that idea. And then what about if you have like a quasi, like maybe you have a space that's like both. I mean, you can just shade them in however you want, or you can just rotate them and know in your mind that this would be okay as a public space, or actually I want this as a private space, and kind of like cluster them together. But it just gives you that visual to really understand how you're laying it out and what you're doing. And then you can just do your flow as far as like your movements with the arrows in like a different color, like a yellow or a blue, or I don't care, use whatever colors you want. I just love green and purple, so those are the two that came to my mind. And so having that too, is understanding like your spaces is a big deal. So for our house, like I said, I'm thinking about just like completely rotating our house into like a whole nother layout. And so without like doing insane structural change, that I think would be doable, I think. But you know what? It doesn't really matter as long as I get that out on paper. Maybe I'll do a post of that. I'll do a couple of drawings for y'all so you can really see. So if you really want to see this type of thing in action, I can put it up on YouTube and I could put it up on Instagram, and you can take a look and see exactly what I mean by this spatial planning, because I think it's a crucial step for you and everybody that wants to design and figure out how their home can work for them more than work against you, right? So, and whether you have an older home, I talk about older homes a lot because that has been my experience, is my own personal experience has been living in older homes and working through those. But I have worked in newer homes and seen some of the really silly design choices that the designers or the architects or whoever made in these, and it's like, this could have flowed way better. This could have made a lot more sense. So like newer homes are just not exempt from this, all right? New homes are not exempt from, you know, plumbing failures or electrical failures. These are all things that like a new home versus an old home, no. They're equal in that sense. And just because an older home isn't built for our newer technology, where a newer home might be, it doesn't matter. You're going to have these nuances in probably most homes, unless you really take the time and custom build your house yourself. And I know that's not always in a budget for everybody. I mean, that's like highly detailed work. So if you can get as much as this done prior to getting, started with a home renovation, then you've already covered a lot of the bases. And wouldn't that be really fun to just have like a no? I know what I want, and I have or if I don't know with like 100% in my gut, I am like right there where maybe somebody else can come with another perspective. Maybe that's another good point to come back to is if you find yourself in this concept space and it's stressing you out, or you are feeling overwhelmed by it, walk away. Like just don't do it right now. Sometimes we just need to get away from it and come back with fresh eyes. It's always something. As an art student, my undergrad was something that was just so beneficial. And when you can come back with refreshed eyes, you can see it at different angles, and it allows you to really just get a better idea. And sometimes having that separation and having a little bit of space from it really allows you to brew like what are the things that was working and what are the things that aren't. And then you can come back and be like, I know exactly what I'm going to do with you now. And it just takes your idea or your concept or your drawing or your painting or your sculpture, whatever it is you're working on, from good to amazing, because now you're just like pouring everything into it and you have more clarity of what it is that you're going to be doing. So the process is what it is. So just allow it to flow. Allow yourself to step away from it. Allow yourself to be free with it and get out of our heads, and to not focus on the how will this work? How is this going to happen? How would this idea even be reasonable or realistic? Because at this point, it doesn't matter. You just need to get it out there. So, are you going to start drawing and figuring out some ideas? Have I totally freaked you out? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, I'll put up some videos if we are feeling this, if we want to know more about like concept and spatial drawings, because again, important and helpful. And so I want to hear your feedback. Tell me if that's something you're interested in, and I can get started on that for you. And also, I just want to make this super clear. It doesn't need to look pretty. It does not need to be pretty. If you don't have like all the colors and stuff, you can literally just do like different pens. If you have different pen colors, if you just do like a couple of like lines, so like private, like sketch lines, kind of like a comic book, right? You can just do like line work on it so you know what's what, and just to identify it. So this isn't about being pretty. This isn't about it being neat. It is just flow, letting it flow. So yes, let me know what your thoughts are. I would love to hear your opinions on this. If you want to hear more about this type of designing and pre-planning. Also, if you want to leave a review, that would mean the world to me. So let me know if this is resonating with you and if it's helpful. And please tell your friends, and make sure you subscribe to the Custom Build podcast. And if you want to see this, if you are listening and you want to watch, you can catch me on YouTube at Hello Kitty Go, and on Instagram and Facebook, all at Hello Kitty Go. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for hanging out today. If you liked what you heard, please make sure you hit subscribe, and I hope to see you again next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.